Must have been in second or third grade when it happened. Too young to be left on my own, but old enough to believe I could handle it. That night, my parents went to an upscale event and called me after they arrived safely at a friend's house. The storm outside had grown too violent for them to drive back. So it was just me, home alone, in our comfortable suburban house. Before hanging up, my mom gave me a list of instructions in her calm but insistent voice. Lock every door, check the windows, close the blinds, leave a light on. I promised her I would, but the truth is, I didn't. I felt excited, thrilled, even by the idea of being completely alone. So instead of following her list, I raided the candy drawer, piled chocolates and gummies onto the coffee table, and turned on the living room TV. With thunder booming and rain hammering against the glass, I felt strangely safe, cocooned in the glow of the screen and my little sugar feast. At some point, the candy caught up with me. I slipped into a sugar crash and fell asleep on the couch. The television's flickering light, the only thing keeping the shadows at bay. When I woke, it was to an unnatural cold, the kind of cold that seemed to crawl under my skin. For a moment, I thought maybe the heater had broken. My mom's words echoed in my mind: lock the doors, check the windows, and guilt twisted in my stomach. I decided to go through her checklist now, just to be sure. The front door, locked. Kitchen windows, secure. Living room blinds, wide open, revealing only streaks of rain and flashes of lightning. Still, the cold remained, heavy and biting. I told myself it was the storm, nothing more. Back in my bedroom, the weather seemed louder, angrier. The rain didn't just fall, it slammed against my window, each drop like a pebble hurled by unseen hands. Thunder shook the walls, and the lightning lit up every corner of the room in sharp, silvery bursts. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. The closet door was open. I knew I had shut it earlier. I always did, because the dark gap unsettled me. But now it was open just enough to reveal a slice of blackness inside. My pulse quickened. I told myself maybe I'd forgotten, maybe the wind or a draft had nudged it. But there were no drafts in that house, and doors didn't just open themselves. I crawled into bed and pulled the blanket over me, praying it would muffle the sound of my own heartbeat. That's when I began to hear faint creaks, the kind that mimic footsteps, slow, heavy, wrong, and yet every floor in our house was carpeted. Terrified, I slid out of bed as quietly as I could and crept down the hall. The dining room table seemed like the safest place, so I ducked under it, curling into a ball. The storm outside raged, but beneath it, I heard something worse. Footsteps descending the stairs. Real, uneven footsteps. I held my breath and dared to peek out. A flash of lightning revealed them legs, muddy and cut, bare feet pressing into the carpet. My whole body went cold. Then came the sound of metal hitting wood. The man had dropped something, a wrench. It clattered against the floor so loudly it seemed to echo through my chest. He froze where he stood. For an eternity, he didn't move, just breathing in the dark. I didn't move either. My small body was rigid with terror, hidden in the shadows of the table. Finally, he began to wander through the house, his steps uneven, his movements jerky. He never spoke, never hurried. He just drifted, as if searching for something he wasn't sure he'd recognize. Then, without a word, he opened the front door and stepped out into the storm, leaving it wide open behind him. I stayed there, trembling beneath the table, until the storm began to fade. When I finally crawled out, my eyes landed on the wrench lying on the floor, wet and cold. Proof it had all been real. I picked it up and hid it in my toy chest, as if burying it could erase the night. I never told my parents. Not the next morning, not years later, not until I was much older and could finally admit what I had seen. At the time I thought I'd be blamed for not locking the doors, for disobeying my mom. But the truth is, even now, decades later, I can still feel that night, the storm, the cold, the legs, caked in mud, stepping onto our carpet. That was the night I stopped being a child. I was 15 when it happened, and I can still remember the way the rain sounded that night, louder, heavier, almost alive. It was a Saturday in May, the kind of storm that seemed endless, where the sky opened up and poured until the gutters overflowed. I had always been a sensitive kid, and by that point, I had already developed a handful of medical quirks, panic attacks, a heart that sometimes raced for no reason, and an unusual need for silence whenever I tried to sleep. Silence, of course, was impossible on a night like that. Our house sat in a safe residential neighborhood, a quiet community where nothing ever seemed to happen. Just a few blocks away was a well-lit public park, the kind with wide paths, benches, and tall trees that offered shade in the daytime. My parents often encouraged me to take walks there when I couldn't sleep, saying the fresh air would do me good. So that night, unable to bear the endless strumming of rain on the roof, I slipped on a hoodie and stepped outside. I left my phone behind. I didn't even take an umbrella. The rain soaked me instantly, but for a while, the walk felt calming. The neighborhood was deserted, street lamps casting soft halos of light against the downpour. Each gust of wind carried the smell of wet pavement and earth, and for a while, I felt like I was alone in the world, wrapped in something bigger than myself. Then, I saw him. At first I thought it was nothing more than a bundle of clothes. But as I drew closer, I realized it was a person lying face down in the middle of the street, right near the edge of the park. He was dressed strangely for the storm, black pants and a dark plaid shirt, thin fabric plastered to his back by the rain. My heart kicked up. Was he injured? Hit by a car? Despite the unease crawling through me, I felt a strange responsibility. I was the only one there, so I approached slowly, calling out, "Hey, are you okay?" No answer. The storm howled around us. The rain slapped against my face. I was maybe 10 feet away when a new sound cut through the night, something that didn't belong. A screech. It didn't sound human. It reminded me of a wounded animal, high-pitched and broken, carrying across the park from somewhere deep within the trees. My skin prickled. I tore my gaze from the man for just a moment, scanning the shadows, but there was nothing there. Just rain, just wind, just darkness. When I looked back, my stomach dropped. The man was no longer lying down. He was sitting upright, his head tilted toward me, his face pale beneath the street lamp. And then without warning, he sprang to his feet and began running at me. I froze at first, my body refusing to react, until I noticed the glint of metal in his hand. A kitchen knife. Long, wet, gleaming beneath the rain. His mouth twisted into something I can only describe as a grin, wide and manic. His teeth bared in a way that made him look less like a person and more like something wearing a person's skin. "I'll kill you," he shouted, voice cracking, with raw hatred, as if I had wronged him somehow, as if I wasn't just some random kid. That was all it took. My body jolted into motion, pure adrenaline flooding me. I turned and bolted into the park, my shoes slipping against the wet ground, my lungs burning as I tried to breathe through the panic. Behind me, I could hear his footsteps pounding against the pavement. Quick, uneven, fueled by something unhinged, I darted into the dense line of trees, branches slapping against my arms and face. The storm swallowed me, and I pressed myself against the trunk of a massive oak, fighting to control my gasping breaths. My heart thundered so loud I was certain he would hear it. I stayed there, barely daring to blink, as the rain poured in sheets around me. Minutes stretched into what felt like forever. I could no longer hear his footsteps, but I didn't dare move. I waited. 10 minutes, 15, 20, by the time I finally stepped out. My entire body was trembling, every muscle tight with fear. I didn't take the direct route home. Instead, I wound through the park, sticking close to the trees, checking over my shoulder with every step. The streetlights seemed weaker, the shadows deeper. Every rustle of leaves felt like a threat. When I finally reached my front door, I collapsed inside, dripping rainwater onto the carpet, lungs aching as I tried to breathe. My parents were already asleep upstairs. I couldn't bring myself to wake them. How could I explain it? That I'd gone out walking in the middle of a storm. That I'd seen a man with a knife and a smile that didn't belong on a human face. For weeks afterward, I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. The screech in the park. The way he went from lying face down to sprinting, as if something had flipped a switch inside him. Maybe he was on drugs. Maybe he was insane. Maybe both. But part of me has always wondered about that sound, the animalistic screech that came from the trees the moment I tried to help him. It was too perfectly timed, too unnatural, like it had called him to life. Even now, years later, when I hear rain pounding against my window, I remember that night, the knife, the grin, and the promise in his voice, carried through the storm. I'll kill you. I was 29 when it happened, and I had just gone through a breakup that left me hollow. My way of coping was always solitude, so I packed up my gear and drove north into California, aiming for a remote riverside spot I'd discovered a few months before. It was quiet, beautiful, and far enough from civilization that I could almost bail, but the moment I pulled into the trailhead parking area, my heart sank. 2 trucks were already there, one gray, one white, old, beat up, the kind of vehicles that looked out of place in the middle of nowhere. For a moment, I considered turning back, but stubbornness and exhaustion kept me. I told myself it was fine. The forest was vast, the river long. Surely there was SP. The hike down to the river was short, 15 minutes at most. The trail was lined with redwoods, their massive trunks blotting out the sky, the air thick with the smell of wet earth. When I reached the water, I saw them too, men standing near the shore. One of them crouched quickly and draped a jacket over something I couldn't quite see. The other gave me a too bright smile and said they were just target shooting cans. His words felt rehearsed, wrong somehow, but I forced a polite nod and walked further upriver. I tried to shake off the unease as I set up my tent. The rain started soon after, light but steady, drumming softly against the canopy of trees. I sat by the river with a book, letting the water's steady rush drown out my thoughts. For a while, it worked. Then one of them appeared. He came alone, the taller of the two. He waved, called out a casual hey, and asked my name. Something in the way he lingered made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to answer, trying not to sound rude. He asked if I was camping alone. I lied and said no, that a friend was due to arrive soon. He nodded, pulled a small disposable camera from his pocket, and snapped a picture of me before I could react. The flash startled me, and before I could ask why, he turned and walked back, downriver, disappearing into the trees. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to leave. That night, the storm intensified. I sat in my tent with my handgun within reach, telling myself I was paranoid, that I was projecting my breakup anxieties onto strangers. Then I heard footsteps outside my tent, slow, uneven, circling. I unzipped the tent, just enough to slip out, gun in hand. There he was, the same man, standing just beyond the firelight, rain dripping down his face, his expression blank. In his hand, he held a small axe. He wasn't chopping wood. He wasn't working on anything. He was just staring at me, his knuckles white around the handle. My voice cracked, but I forced it out. Drop it. Now. He didn't move. I fired a warning shot into the ground. The crack of the gun echoed off the river, sharp and final. That broke him. Slowly, he set the axe down, his expression twisting into something I couldn't read. Then he said something I'll never forget. I already took care of Ivan. His tone was flat, as if it were just a statement of fact. I didn't know who Ivan was, his friend, the other man. My blood went cold. I ordered him to kick the axe toward me. He obeyed. Then I told him to take off his shoes, grab my gear, and walk ahead of me down the trail. He hesitated, but the gun convinced him. When we reached a clearing near the trailhead, I threw his shoes into the brush and told him to keep walking in the opposite direction of my car. I never looked back. I just ran. I drove until I reached cell service and called the police, my hands still shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. They said they'd send someone out, but I never heard back. I don't know what they found, if they even looked. All I know is that I left my tent, my gear, everything behind, and that man's words still echo in my head whenever I think about it. I already took care of Ivan. Who was Ivan? What had he meant? Was there a body hidden under that jacket by the river? I'll never know. But sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night, I imagine those trucks still sitting at the trailhead, engines off, waiting for someone else to wander in.